Like it or not, Adobe is the king, or the queen, of the photo editing world. Right now they're doing a Marketing Roadshow, and here's what they just shared in Portland. So first of all, what even was this event? It was definitely a marketing effort, and it was aimed at folks in various creative industries. I found out about it through a direct email from Adobe. As we checked in, we were asked to identify ourselves on our name tags with these little colored dots representing one or more 6 different kind of creative professions. So we were asked to identify whether we were a photographer, a videographer or filmmaker, an illustrator, a UX designer, user experience designer, a graphic designer, or as an advertiser or marketer. And as I chatted with folks as we were waiting for the event to begin and having a beverage, these things, they all overlap, right? At least in the professional world. I think as a professional photographer, I've worked with pretty much all of these professions at one or more points throughout my career. And so it was interesting to see what Adobe was going to show that intersected with all of this. The theme for their demonstrations, I think, was AI, speed, and social. They hit 4 major topics. So what I want to do is let's hit each one of those along with a few thoughts as we go. Photographers, you're going to want to make sure you stick around until the end. First up was Adobe Firefly, which is Adobe's generative AI engine. It's now in its 3rd major iteration. And what I thought was interesting is Adobe didn't start talking about Adobe Firefly by showing what can be done with Adobe Firefly, at least from a graphics standpoint. Instead, what they talked about was telling how the AI was trained. They talked about using Adobe stock images to train it, or other openly licensed work. They pointed out that makes it commercially safe, that it can be used for commercial purposes without a fear of a copyright lawsuit becoming an issue for someone. That seems like the kind of thing that's going to be really important to the designers or photographers or illustrators in the room who want to incorporate that work into their professional product. And at this point, we've all seen generative AI. There was nobody in that room that was going to be wowed by Adobe showing off, a prompt window and then creating an image on its own. So the question really is, what does Adobe want to show off that makes Adobe special? Well, there's a few things. One of the things they made sure to note was that they're building content credentials into Adobe Firefly, and that gets baked in when you create an image either directly through Firefly on the web, or whether you use it inside of one of Adobe's Creative Cloud applications like Photoshop or Illustrator. So content credentials, this is a product of an industry organization, the C2PA, and Adobe used the phrase to think of it like a digital nutrition label. It tells you where did this image come from, what's the provenance of it. If that's interesting to you, if you want me to do a whole video just talking about content credentials, C2PA, what that even means, and how we're going to label AI images, drop a comment below to let me know that that's something you would like to hear me do. I've got a lot of material on it, and I could go in depth, but I only want to do that if that's going to be useful. So let me know in the comments. The next thing that they did is they talked about how are we as creative professionals going to use generative AI not to replace our work, but to enhance our work and to complement our work. And one of the things they showed was using it for ideation and exploration. So if you have a concept or an idea, you can put that into a generative AI prompt and see what sort of results you might get. They also wanted to show off one of the newer features, which is using reference images, either for structure or for style. Style, I think, is fairly straightforward. If you want an image that's a similar style to an existing piece of work, you can tell Firefly to create something that matches the style of another piece of image. Now, a structure reference is also interesting. I'm a photographer, not an illustrator. I can't draw. I can barely draw stick people, right? But I can create just some basic line art. And I can take that basic line art, put it as input into Adobe Firefly as a structure reference image. And when Firefly generates the resulting AI generated image, it will use that structure reference to give you something similar. This is really cool because one of the challenges with generative AI images right now is figuring out How do you type the words to describe what you really want in the resulting image? And sometimes it can be hard to figure out the right prompt. But if you're able to give it a sketch or you're able to give it something similar to start from, that's a great starting point for Firefly to go from. So that was the first section. Now, the next section was Adobe Illustrator. And you know how I mentioned I can't draw, right? Yeah. I'm going to admit, I kind of ignored a lot of the Adobe Illustrator chunk, and I might have been like ADHDing off on Instagram stories. So I can't tell you a lot about that. Part 3 was all about Adobe Express, and this was a big focus of the event. Adobe Express, first of all, how many of you are actually using it? If you're using Adobe Express, again, drop me a comment below and let me know. If you've never even heard of it, drop me a comment below because I'm curious what the visibility is to this. Adobe calls Adobe Express on its website an all-in-one content creation app with generative AI features designed to be commercially safe. What does that mean though, right? Canva is kind of a big deal right now. Adobe Express is their attempt to compete with Canva. It's something for business professionals to use. It's something for people where creating imagery or creating graphics is a small part of their job, probably. That said, as a professional photographer or as another creative pro, don't ignore it. It's for you too. You can use it too. In fact, it might be included with the Creative Cloud plan that you already have. I went out to my Creative Cloud plan and looked at the details, and sure enough, I have full access to Adobe Express as part of my plan. So I'm going to use it for creating social media graphics. You can use it with your own images. It integrates with generative AI, with Firefly, so that you can help, enhance or create new work there. Adobe Express is very social focused. It's a great tool for social media. And one of the things that it can do is it can automatically resize things for the different social platforms. So if you're posting to Facebook, you might want a horizontal, a landscape orientated graphic or image. If you're going to post to Instagram, obviously you want something vertical. Maybe you want something square. You can tell it to, hey, take this thing and then create versions of that thing. And it'll use AI to manipulate that to create something that's going to look good on these different social platforms. And when it's ready to go, you can actually have AI generate the captions for those posts directly. Now, that said, Adobe did warn us to make sure that you read the captions before you post, because just like with anything in generative AI, sometimes it doesn't get it quite right. The last thing that they showed were the updates to Adobe Photoshop, right? So as a photographer, I was curious to see what they were going to show here. And turns out what they showed, both generative AI and otherwise, were the recent updates to Photoshop that coincidentally, I just made a video about those right over here, all for you.